So now Eliminators have taken an enormous points cut. Are they back to being one of the strongest Space Marine units that you can take? Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're talking Eliminators, which have certainly had a new light shone on them when they dropped so drastically in points in Chapter Approved 2021. Eliminators have generally been quite competitive over the last couple of years. In particular, I think they were probably strongest when the Space Marine Codex towards the end of 8th edition dropped. At that point they only cost 24 points, they had access to full Master Artisans rerolls, and you could also use that powerful guided aim ability to make them +1 to hit and wound. In 9th edition I'd say they'd been merely okay. Certainly not a bad sniper unit, and their ballistic skill buff to 2+ really did help them, but costing 30 points just meant that they weren't quite as standout amazing as they used to be. Now they've dropped 5 points per model. It means that a standard squad has gone from 90 points all the way down to 75. They're now back in the territory where they're really not that big an investment for a Space Marine list, and I think a few squads of these could be a really interesting option going forward. For this video we'll just take a look over the datasheet, talk a bit about their damage, durability and other utility, buffs and synergies, and how I think about using them in game. So here we have the datasheet for the standard Eliminator squad. They are of course a 3 model heavy support choice for Codex Space Marines. They're Phobos Primaris Marines with a 2+ ballistic skill. They get to forward deploy via concealed positions, and they get a +1 save when they're receiving the benefit of cover with their camo cloaks. Those 2 rules just add quite a lot of ability all by themselves. They can potentially start in the midfield on some high up firing positions, and if they can get any cover saves, then they're actually going to be a lot harder to shift than they really should be. Effectively a 1+ save if they're in light cover. In terms of war gear, they can either take the standard bolt sniper rifle for free, a las fusel for +10 points, and the sergeant can swap either of these out for an instigator bolt carbine if he wants to. At the new lower points cost, both the bolt sniper rifles and the las fusels do look interesting, though out of the two I prefer the bolt sniper rifles. They're just really quite cheap for the amount of damage that you get. The bolt snipers will typically be firing mortis rounds, single shots at 36-inch range, strength 5, AP -2 and damage 2, and 6s to wound inflict an additional mortal wound on top of that. If they don't have any characters to hunt, they could think about swapping out for hyperfrag rounds, which are D3 shots at strength 5, AP 0, damage 1 and blast, and there are some niche circumstances you might want to use executioner rounds. They give you an additional +1 to hit, and the target does not receive the benefit of cover. They are only AP -1 and damage 1 though, so the vast majority of the time you want the mortis rounds. The las fusels are 36-inch range, heavy 1, strength 8, AP -3 and damage 3, so they're going to be fairly efficient at hunting things like toughness 7 vehicles or 3 wound models, and have an advantage over melter weapons for having quite a decent range. Las fusels can't directly target characters though, and I'm still not sure that they quite get there in terms of damage output. If you compare them to things like eradicators or attack bikes, they're just not going to do anywhere near as much damage, and even with ballistic skill 2+, don't really compare amazingly against standard devastators with las cannons, who can get a lot of extra utility out of that signum and the armorium cherub, have longer range and higher strength. In general, of their 2 loadouts, I'd be much more tempted by the bolt snipers. The instigator carbine's interesting. It's a 24-inch assault 1 weapon with strength 4, AP -1 and damage 2. Again, it can ignore lookout sir. And if you have a squad with an instigator carbine in it, then the Eliminator squad can move as if it were the movement phase just after you've taken your shots. You're basically trading out some damage output for annoying move shoot move ability, where theoretically you could have some really quite annoying Eliminators jumping out of cover, shooting and then hiding away again. I think though for the most part people want to just take the 3 bolt sniper rifles and just really double down on getting the maximum amount of damage on enemy characters. So how much damage can these new 70-point Eliminators do then? Against say a guard character with a 5+ invul save or Space Marine Librarian, a squad for 75 points will on average do around about 2 or 3 wounds to them. It means that most support characters should be able to be picked off with just a couple of Eliminator squads, but you can't really expect just to take one squad and for them to do the job all by themselves. If they don't have any characters to target, then their damage output is okay but not particularly stellar. Fairly efficient against elite infantry, but not particularly great against things like vehicles, where a 75-point squad will do around about 1 or 2 wounds to them. Toughness wise, as we mentioned, they're fairly hardy to enemy shooting, for a potential for their 3+ save to have +2 to their armour when they're in light cover. They'll be very hard to remove with small arms fire that way, but still will be quite vulnerable to anything that's high AP. They'll only be saving on a 4+ against anything AP -3. Theoretically, you could use transhuman physiology to make them even tougher against high damage weapons. Might be worth it depending on what the opponent has to shoot at them. Now they're so cheap, only 75 points, They actually might be a unit that you could use kind of flexibly depending on the opponent. If they have important characters that you need to take out with sniper fire, then obviously you could focus on their damage output, but if they have no suitable targets to hunt, then they might just be better served as acting like screens or getting on midfield objectives early. At 25 points, they're only a little bit more expensive than infiltrators and incursors. They may lack obsec, but they're slightly hardier in cover. You could either move block enemy heavies with a cheap 75-point unit, or just help zone out areas of the board to deep strike. They'll be even better at doing that if they want to also take a high point and cover as per the new FAQ rules. And I think that prime real estate for Eliminators is going to be somewhere high in cover in the midfield, good lines of sight, and maybe providing a little bit of insurance against charges. At 25 points, I think that Eliminators can be efficient in virtually any chapter. Some though offer a few more benefits over others. Ultramarines might be able to move and shoot via their stationary doctrine, and fall back and shoot could be fairly handy too. Iron Hands get on very well with Eliminators, they get extra durability with that 6+ feel no pain, and they really like their unique Devastator doctrine, getting them to AP -3, moving and shooting for no penalty, and also re-rolling 1s to hit as well. Perhaps one of the single strongest chapters to use Eliminators with though are Raven Guard. Their chapter tactic will make them even harder to remove in cover, another -1 to hit, and they will get their own cover save outside 18 inches, so really hard to take out in the open as well. On top of that, their unique character hunting doctrine will really amp up their damage output. Against toughness 4 Space Marine Librarians, for example, you go up to an average of 3.2 wounds each time you shoot. Salamanders are nice with their wound reroll, and they can have a +1 to wound stratagem if you really want to take out a key HQ. Imperial Fists are good with them as well. The exploding 6s will equate to a 20% damage boost on these, and they also ignore cover. And Deathwatch can field a really interesting unit. Their Spectrus kill teams can allow for 5-man Eliminator squads, and you could even think about buying them the reroll 1s versus HQ kill team upgrade for an additional 20 points. Otherwise, I think they will generally want to be on the board turn 1. Using Devastator Doctrine for a little bit of extra AP will really amp up damage versus hard targets. Though in general, I'm not sure I'd really be looking to invest all that much more in supporting them. I think one of the main assets of Eliminators is that they're quite small units that can act quite independently. I think it makes sense to invest character buffs in other things, unless it just happens to be really convenient for how they're placed on the board. Theoretically, you could get extra damage output from captains, lieutenants, chaplains, and heal models with apothecaries, though maybe this all might be a little bit more important if you're taking the las fusils for heavy anti-tank fire, in which case you could maybe think about building a bit of an Eliminator castle and focusing down enemy tanks. They've got a few potential stratagems that could be handy. Transhuman Physiology for 1 command point is a good durability boost, could be good for anything strength 8 that targets them, which are actually quite efficient things for killing them. Guerrilla Tactics could allow a unit to disappear and reappear later in the game. Maybe could be handy for a late game push to get in table quarters or deploy some scramblers or something. Finally, though it's very pricey, 2 command points for steady advance, doing an action and still shooting, could maybe be worth it sometimes. Maybe if you absolutely need to do an action, and you also absolutely need to try and kill an enemy character, and are willing to pay the high 2 CP premium. Overall, with the new points cost, I think that Eliminators are looking very efficient indeed, and for the points they might be one of the most efficient sniper units in the game of 40k as it stands. I feel they're going to be particularly interesting with armies like Sisters, Drukhari and Admech running around, all of which quite like to field cheap support characters that are ideal prey for Eliminator squads. Perhaps they could be a bit of a meta pick against these new top lists. Overall, I just really like the way that they can both be a decent damage dealing unit and also have lots of utility for move blocking and deployment options. It just seems that you're rarely going to be going wrong with them at this price tag. Anyway, let me know what you think. I'll certainly be interested to hear what you have to say down in the comments. Might we be seeing more Eliminators in competitive Space Marine lists going forward? If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, or I'll certainly keep the 40k strategy videos coming. I tend to post new videos out pretty much every day. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the content on the channel, I would just like to mention that I do have a Patreon page, which is down in the video description below. Channel patrons do get a few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry to the regular prize giveaways, with the chance to win some really big model kits every single month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support the channel, then the link is down in the video description below. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.